I was sitting on my back porch in Charlotte, sipping coffee I'd brewed too strong, when a black Dodge Charger pulled into my driveway. Two men in dark suits stepped out. The shorter one held a federal badge up to the morning light and said four words that split my life in half. "Sir, we need to talk." That was October 14th, 2023, a Monday. I remember because I'd just come back from my morning walk around the Freedom Park Loop. Same walk I'd taken every day since I retired from Duke Energy 3 years prior. My knees were still warm from the exercise. My mind was still quiet. That was the last quiet morning I'd have for a long time. Before I tell you what those agents said to me on my own front porch, let me ask you something real quick. Where are you watching this from right now? What time is it where you are? Drop your city in the comments. I'm always curious. And if this story hits you the way I think it will, go ahead and subscribe. You're going to want to see what comes next. My name is Harold Vincent Caldwell. I'm 64 years old. Born and raised in Charlotte, North Carolina. Graduated from North Carolina A&T in 1981 with a degree in electrical engineering. Spent 34 years at Duke Energy. Started as a junior engineer. Retired as a senior project director overseeing power grid infrastructure across the Carolinas. My pension was $6,400 a month. My Social Security was $3,200. I had $312,000 in a 401(k) through Fidelity, and another $89,000 in a savings account at Truist Bank, the branch on South Tryon Street. I'm telling you these numbers for a reason, because every single one of them matters later. My wife, Gloria, passed in 2019, breast cancer. She was 59. We had 36 years together, and not a single one of them was wasted. After she died, I kept the house on Selwyn Avenue. 4 bedrooms, paid off since 2014. Too big for one man, but I couldn't leave. Her garden was still in the backyard. Her handwriting was still on the grocery list, stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet from Myrtle Beach. We had one son, Darnell Morris Caldwell, born March 3rd, 1990. Named after Gloria's father, Darnell was always different from me, and I don't mean that as criticism. I mean it as fact. Where I was patient, he was restless. Where I valued steady work, he chased speed. Where I found pride in building something brick by brick over decades, Darnell wanted the building to appear overnight, fully furnished. I used to tell him something my own father told me back when we lived in that little house on Beatty's Ford Road. "Son, the man who builds slow builds strong. The man who builds fast builds for the wind." Darnell would smile when I said that, nod his head, then go right back to whatever scheme had his attention that week. He went to UNC Charlotte for 2 years, dropped out in 2011. Said college was a system designed for employees, not entrepreneurs. That stung me. I won't lie. I'd walked across that stage at A&T with my mother crying in the 3rd row. Education meant something to my family, but I didn't push. Gloria told me to give him space, and I trusted her judgment more than my own. Over the next 12 years, Darnell bounced between ideas. A clothing brand that lasted 4 months. A podcast about generational wealth that produced 11 episodes. A consulting firm with no clients. An app that never got past the wireframe stage. Each time, he'd come to me with a pitch. Eyes bright. Voice fast. Numbers that didn't add up but sounded impressive if you weren't paying attention. And each time, I helped. $5,000 here. $8,000 there. A co-signed lease on an office in the South End district. A used BMW 3 Series. I put the down payment on because his credit was too thin. Gloria used to say, "Harold, you're not helping him. You're padding his fall." She was right. She was almost always right. By 2021, something changed in Darnell. He got quieter, more confident, but in a different way. Not the anxious confidence of a man pitching an idea he half believed in. This was settled, almost cold. He started wearing tailored suits, driving a white Mercedes-AMG GT, moved into an apartment at The View on 5th Street, the luxury tower downtown. Rent there starts at $3,500 a month for a one-bedroom. I asked him once, over dinner at Roosters on South Boulevard, "Son, what exactly are you doing now?" He pulled out his phone, showed me his LinkedIn profile. The header image was a stock photo of a city skyline at night. His title read, Founder and CEO, Caldwell Digital Capital. 8-figure crypto entrepreneur, speaker, investor, visionary. 8 figures. That means at least $10 million. I looked at that screen for a long time. My son, the same boy who couldn't keep a lemonade stand running for a full Saturday in 1999, was claiming to manage 8 figures in cryptocurrency. "Dad, the blockchain space is different," he said, cutting into a steak. "It's not like your generation. You don't need 40 years and a pension. You need vision, timing, and the courage to move." I nodded, ate my food, drove home. Something didn't sit right. But I told myself what every father tells himself when his son seems happy. Maybe he figured it out. Maybe I was wrong about him. I wasn't wrong. That Monday morning in October, the 2 men standing in my driveway introduced themselves. The taller one was Agent Brian Whitfield, SEC, Charlotte Regional Office. The shorter one was Agent Diana Reeves, also SEC, with a specialization in digital asset fraud. I invited them inside, offered coffee. Agent Whitfield declined. Agent Reeves accepted. Black, no sugar. They sat at my dining room table, the same table where Gloria and I had hosted Thanksgiving for 30 years straight. Agent Whitfield opened a manila folder. Inside were bank statements, transaction records, screenshots. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, "are you aware that your Social Security benefits have been redirected since January of 2022? I stared at him. "Redirected? My deposits come in on the 2nd Wednesday of every month. I check my Truist account regularly." Agent Reeves leaned forward. "Sir, when was the last time you actually logged into your Social Security online account? Not your bank account. Your SSA account." I thought about it, and my stomach dropped. I hadn't logged into the SSA portal since I'd first set it up in 2020. I checked my bank deposits, yes. But the SSA portal itself, the one that shows where payments are actually being sent, not once in 3 years. Agent Whitfield slid a document across the table. In January 2022, someone changed the direct deposit routing on your Social Security account. Your $3,200 monthly payment has been going to a Chime account registered under a business entity called Caldwell Digital Capital, LLC. Caldwell Digital Capital, my son's company. I felt the room tilt. Not dramatically, not like in the movies. Just a slow lean, like the house itself was shifting on its foundation. I started, then stopped. "That's my son's business." Agent Reeves nodded, slowly. The way someone nods when they already know the answer but need you to say it out loud. "Mr. Caldwell, we've been investigating Caldwell Digital Capital for 7 months. Your son has been promoting himself as a cryptocurrency fund manager. He claims to have generated over $12 million in returns for investors. But our forensic accountants have traced the source of the capital, and a significant portion of it originated from government benefits." "Government benefits," I repeated. "Your Social Security, your late wife's survivor benefits, which were still in a linked account. And Mr. Caldwell, there's more. We found evidence that your personal information, your Social Security number, date of birth, and mother's maiden name was used to open 3 additional credit accounts in your name. 2 through Capital One, 1 through Discover. Combined balance of $74,000. $74,000. In my name. Accounts I never opened, never signed for, never knew existed. My son didn't just lie on LinkedIn. He stole my identity to build his. I sat at that table for 45 minutes after the agents left. Didn't move. Didn't make a call. Didn't eat. I just sat there with my hands flat on the wood, feeling the grain under my fingertips, and I tried to understand how the boy I raised, the boy I coached in Little League at Revolution Park, the boy who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during service at Friendship Missionary Baptist Church, the boy I carried to bed 1,000 times, how that boy grew into a man who could sit across from me at dinner, order a $48 steak, show me a LinkedIn profile full of lies, and know the whole time that the money paying for that steak came from his father's Social Security, from his dead mother's benefits. I called my sister, Lorraine, that evening. She lives in Greensboro, retired schoolteacher, 71 years old, sharp as a razor. I told her everything, every word the agent said, every number, every document. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Harold, don't call Donnell tonight. Don't call him tomorrow. You need to think before you move, because once you move, this can't be undone." Lorraine was right. Just like Gloria would have been, I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my home office, the room I'd converted from the guest bedroom after Gloria passed, and I started pulling records, bank statements from 2021 forward, credit reports from all 3 bureaus, every piece of mail I'd received from the SSA, and here's what I found. Or more accurately, what I didn't find. Sometime in late 2021, my mail had stopped arriving normally. Not all of it. Just specific pieces. I'd assumed the post office was inconsistent, maybe some carrier changes in the neighborhood. But now, looking at the pattern, I realized the missing pieces were all financial. SSA statements, Capital One correspondence, a Discover card welcome packet I never received because I never knew the account existed. Darnell had access to my house. He had a key. He came by every Sunday for dinner, a tradition I'd insisted on after Gloria died because I didn't want to lose my son the way some men lose their children to distance and silence. Every Sunday, he'd arrive around 4 p.m. We'd talk. He'd check the grill. Sometimes he'd grab the mail on his way in. And I never thought twice about it. He'd been filtering my mail, taking what he needed, leaving the rest, my own son, in my own home, at my own mailbox. I spent the next 2 weeks doing something I learned from 34 years of engineering. I built a system. Not an electrical grid this time, an information grid. I pulled my full credit report from Equifax, TransUnion, and Experian. Total damage across the 3 fraudulent accounts was $74,200. The Capital One cards had been opened in March and July of 2022. The Discover card in November 2022. All 3 listed my home address, but had digital correspondence set to an email I didn't recognize. He'd created an email using my initials, my last name, close enough to seem legitimate if anyone checked. Far enough from my real email that I'd never see the notifications. I drove to the Social Security Administration office on East Independence Boulevard on a Wednesday morning. Waited 2 hours and 17 minutes. When I finally sat down with a representative, a kind woman named Mrs. Patterson, she confirmed what the agents had told me. My direct deposit had been changed online on January 4th, 2022. Using my login credentials. The IP address traced to a location in Uptown Charlotte, 3 blocks from Darnell's apartment at The View. 19 months of Social Security payments. $3,200 per month. That's $60,800. Gone. rerouted to an account I didn't control, funding a lifestyle my son didn't earn. And the survivor benefits from Gloria's account? Another $1,800 per month since February 2022. 20 months. $36,000. My late wife's benefits. The money the government sends because a woman who worked 28 years as a registered nurse at Atrium Health died too young. He took that too. I'm going to be honest with you about something. The money hurt. Of course it did. $96,800 in Social Security alone, plus $74,200 in fraudulent credit. We're talking about $171,000. That's not nothing. That's 3 years of careful retirement planning. Evaporated. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the arithmetic of deception. The calculation required. My son had to sit down, probably at that glass desk in his luxury apartment, and make a series of deliberate choices. He had to obtain my Social Security number. He had to learn my mother's maiden name, Gloria's mother, Evelyn Harris from Gastonia. He had to create a fake email. He had to log into a federal government portal and change my banking information. He had to open credit cards. He had to intercept my mail every Sunday while I was seasoning ribs and warming up potato salad for him. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a desperate moment. This was architecture. Weeks of planning, months of maintenance, and the whole time, sitting at my table, eating my food, calling me Pops and asking how my knees were feeling. That's what kept me up at night, not the money. The performance. I made 3 decisions in those 2 weeks. First, I hired an attorney, Patricia Owens at Owens & Blackwell, a firm on East 4th Street that specializes in elder financial abuse and identity theft. Patricia is a Howard Law graduate, sharp, no nonsense, 52 years old. She told me straight, "Mr. Caldwell, your son committed federal crimes. Identity theft, wire fraud, Social Security fraud. The SEC is building their case regardless of what you do. But you need to protect yourself civilly and financially. Today. Second, I froze every credit account in my name. All 3 bureaus. Changed every password. Set up 2-factor authentication on everything. Got a new P.O. box at the UPS store on Park Road for sensitive mail. Third, I decided not to confront Darnell. Not yet. I wanted to understand the full scope. Every dollar. Every lie. Every person he dragged into this. Because I had a feeling, the kind of feeling you develop after 6 decades of watching people, that what those agents showed me was only the surface. I was right about that too. Patricia put me in touch with a forensic accountant named Raymond Burke. Independent contractor, works with law firms on fraud cases. Raymond spent 3 weeks tracing the money. What he found was, I don't even know the right word. Staggering doesn't cover it. Caldwell Digital Capital, LLC, was registered in Delaware in September 2021. Darnell was the sole managing member. The company had no real product, no real fund, no real investments. What it had was a website, a professional one, built by a firm in India for $4,500. It had a LinkedIn presence with 14,000 followers. It had a Twitter account, now X, posting daily about crypto alpha and generational wealth strategies. It had a YouTube channel with 47 videos of Darnell in expensive suits, standing in front of rented Lamborghinis, talking about passive income pipelines. And it had investors. 11 of them. Real people who gave Darnell their money. Total invested capital from outside sources, $340,000. Combined with my stolen Social Security and fraudulent credit, Darnell had access to over $500,000. And Ramin's analysis showed that approximately $410,000 of it had been spent. Not invested. Spent. The Mercedes lease. The apartment. The suits. The watches. Dinners at Steak 48 and the Capitol Grill. A $22,000 trip to Dubai he posted about on Instagram with the caption, "Working from anywhere." The crypto lifestyle chose me. The crypto lifestyle didn't choose him. I paid for it. His investors paid for it. And none of us knew. I thought I understood the full picture then. But I was still missing the biggest piece. It was Raymond who found it. Buried in the financial records, 3 wire transfers to a woman named Vanessa Kirby in Raleigh, totaling $85,000. I didn't know who Vanessa Kirby was. Patricia's team looked into it. Vanessa Kirby was Darnell's girlfriend. They'd been together since 2020. She drove a Range Rover Velar. She lived in a townhouse in North Hills that Darnell was paying for. And she had a son, a 3-year-old boy. I had a grandson that I didn't know about. My son had a child, a whole family he was building, and he funded it with money he stole from me, from his mother's memory. And he never said a word, not at Sunday dinner, not on my birthday, not on the anniversary of Gloria's death, when he'd sit in my living room and tell me how much he missed her. That was the moment I stopped being patient because I wanted to be. I became patient because I had to be. Because if I moved on anger, I would have lost everything, my dignity, my case, my chance to see this through the right way. Lorraine drove down from Greensboro that weekend. She sat in Gloria's chair in the living room, the green wingback by the window, and she let me talk for 3 hours straight. She didn't interrupt, didn't give advice, just listened. When I finished, she said one thing. "Harold, let the truth do the work. You don't have to carry this. You just have to set it down where people can see it. I spent 34 years as an engineer. I understand systems, load-bearing structures, stress points. Every system has a limit, a threshold where the weight becomes too much and the structure fails, not because someone attacks it from outside, but because the design itself was flawed. Darnell's entire life was a flawed design, built on my credit, my identity, my trust, and the weight of his own lies was already more than the structure could hold. I didn't need to tear it down. I just needed to stop holding it up." Patricia filed a civil complaint on November 8th, 2023. Identity theft, fraud, conversion of assets, elder financial abuse. She also filed a formal victim statement with the SEC, cooperating fully with their investigation. And then I waited, because I'd learned in my 64 years that patience defeats arrogance. Every single time. Not quickly, not cleanly, but completely. The next 3 months were the hardest of my life since Gloria's diagnosis. Thanksgiving came. Darnell called to ask about dinner plans. I told him I wasn't feeling well, that Lorraine was handling the meal at her place this year. He said, "No worries, Pops. I'll send you something nice." He sent a $200 Omaha Steaks box. Paid for almost certainly with money that originated from my own benefits. Christmas was worse. He showed up at my door on December 23rd with a gift bag. Inside was a Mont Blanc pen. Retail price around $600. He hugged me in the doorway and said, "Love you, Pops. You deserve the best." I took the pen, said thank you, watched him drive away in that white Mercedes. Then I went inside, sat in my office, and added the pen to the evidence file Patricia was building. January 2024. The SEC moved. They issued subpoenas for all of Caldwell Digital Capital's financial records. Bank accounts at Chime, at Bank of America, at a crypto exchange called Coinbase. Every transaction, every transfer, every fake invoice Darnell had created to make his fund look legitimate. They also contacted his 11 investors, one by one. Each received a formal letter explaining that the SEC had reason to believe they were victims of securities fraud. I know all this because Patricia was in communication with the SEC's lead attorney, and because 3 of those investors called me directly. The first was a man named Gerald Tate, 58 years old, retired firefighter from Concord. He'd given Darnell $50,000, his entire early retirement savings. Gerald found my number through the A&T alumni directory because Darnell had told him that Caldwell Digital Capital was a family business, built on my father's legacy in engineering. He used my name, my reputation, my career, as a sales tool. Gerald Tate called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and his voice was shaking. "Mr. Caldwell, I need to know. Did you know about this?" "No, sir," I said. "I didn't, and I'm a victim too." The silence on the other end lasted about 10 seconds. Then Gerald said, "I believe you, and I'm sorry. For both of us." The second investor who called was a woman named Brenda Holloway, 45, schoolteacher in Gastonia. She'd given Darnell $25,000, money she'd saved for her daughter's tuition at Spelman. Brenda didn't cry on the phone. She was too angry for that. She said, "Your son sat in my living room, Mr. Caldwell. He ate my pot roast. He showed me charts and projections. He called me Auntie Brenda and told me he'd triple my money in 18 months. I didn't have words for Brenda Holloway. I just said, 'I'm sorry. I'm cooperating with every agency involved. And I promise you, the truth is coming out. 3 real people with real savings, real plans, real trust.' And my son treated all of it like tokens in a game he was playing. Patricia told me something during our meeting in late January that I've thought about every day since. She said, "Harold, in 20 years of practicing law, I've seen 2 kinds of fraud. There's desperation fraud, where someone in a terrible situation makes a terrible choice. And there's entitlement fraud, where someone believes the rules simply don't apply to them. Your son's case is the second kind. And that's always harder, because desperation can be understood. Entitlement has to be broken. I thought about that word for a long time. Broken. I didn't want my son broken. I wanted him awake. But I was starting to understand that sometimes those are the same thing." February 17th, 2024. A Saturday, the day everything converged. I got a call from Patricia at 8:15 in the morning. "Harold, the SEC is filing formal charges on Monday. Securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, federal charges. I wanted you to hear it from me first." I thanked her, hung up, and then I did something I'd been avoiding for 4 months. I called my son. "Hey, Pops," he answered. Cheerful, easy, like nothing in the world was wrong. I could hear music in the background, something with a heavy bass line. He was probably in that apartment, the one my Social Security paid for. "Darnell, I need you to come to the house today, this afternoon. 3 o'clock. Everything okay?" 3 o'clock, Darnell. He paused. "All right, Pops, I'll be there." He arrived at 312, white Mercedes in the driveway. Tailored navy coat. Leather shoes that probably cost more than my first month's salary at Duke Energy in 1984. He walked in with that same confident stride, the one he developed sometime around 2021, when the stolen money started flowing and he convinced himself he'd earned it. I was sitting at the dining room table, the same table where the SEC agents had sat 4 months ago, the same table where Gloria and I planned our finances every first Sunday of the month for 36 years. On the table was a folder. Manila. Thick. Inside was everything. The SEC documents, the credit reports, the SSA records, the forensic accountant's findings, the wire transfers to Vanessa Kirby, the investor complaints. Every piece of evidence organized chronologically, tabbed with colored dividers. 34 years of engineering taught me to present information clearly. Darnell sat down across from me, looked at the folder, looked at me. "What's this?" "Open it." He opened it, and I watched his face. I've seen a lot of things in my life. I watched my mother take her last breath in 1997. I held Gloria's hand when the doctor said, "Stage 4. I stood at funerals for friends who didn't make it to retirement. But I've never seen anything quite like what happened to my son's face in the 90 seconds it took him to flip through those pages. The confidence didn't crack. It dissolved, layer by layer, like paint stripped from a wall, revealing the bare wood underneath. The bare, soft, unprepared wood. He closed the folder, sat back, and said nothing for almost 2 minutes. I let the silence work. Because silence, when it's built on truth, is louder than any accusation I could make. Finally, he spoke. "Pops, I can explain." "No," I said. "You can't, because I've already seen the explanation. It's in that folder. Every routing number, every wire transfer, every fake invoice, every dollar you took from my Social Security, every dollar you took from your mother's survivor benefits, and every dollar you took from 11 people who trusted you because you used my name to sell them a lie." His jaw tightened. It wasn't supposed to go like this. The investments were real at first. I was trading. I was making returns. But the market crashed in 2022, and I needed capital to cover the losses, and I thought you thought if you could just steal from your father, nobody would notice. I was going to pay it back. When, Darnell? When were you going to pay back the $60,800 in Social Security you rerouted? When were you going to close the $74,000 in credit cards you opened in my name? When were you going to return Gerald Tate's $50,000? Or Brenda Holloway's $25,000 that was meant for her daughter's college? He didn't answer. And when? I said, keeping my voice level, keeping my hands flat on the table. "Were you going to tell me about my grandson?" That's when his eyes changed. Not guilt this time. Fear. "How did you—" 3 wire transfers to Vanessa Kirby. $85,000 total. A forensic accountant found them in about 4 hours. You have a 3-year-old son that I've never met, never held, never knew existed. And you paid for his life with money you stole from mine." Darnell put his hands over his face. His shoulders started shaking. But I want to be clear about something. I wasn't moved by the tears. Not because I'm cold. Because I'd spent 4 months watching this man perform. Sunday dinners. Christmas hugs. "Love you, Pops." I no longer knew which version of my son was real, and which was the show. "The SEC is filing federal charges on Monday," I said. "Securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. These are not state charges, Darnell. These are federal. Do you understand what that means?" He lowered his hands. His eyes were red. "What do you want me to do?" And here's the thing. That question told me everything. Not, "How can I make this right?" Not, "I'm sorry for what I've done to you." But, "What do you want me to do?" Still looking for instructions. Still waiting for someone else to solve it. I said, "I want you to get a lawyer, a real one. Not someone you found on Instagram. I want you to cooperate fully with the SEC. I want you to make a complete accounting of every dollar you took. From me, from your investors, from everyone. And I want you to understand something, Darnell, and I need you to hear this with your whole chest. I'm not going to protect you from this." He stared at me. "You're my father." "I am. And that's exactly why I'm not going to protect you. Because your mother and I didn't raise a thief. We didn't raise a con man. We raised you in this house, at this table, with values. Honesty, hard work, respect. And somewhere along the way, you decided those values were too slow for you. You decided shortcuts were faster than integrity. Well, here's where the shortcuts lead. To this table. To this folder. To federal charges." He stood up, walked to the window. Stood there with his back to me, looking out at Gloria's garden. The rose bushes she planted in 2015, the year before the diagnosis. "Mom would be—" "Don't," I said. And that was the only time my voice cracked. "Don't bring her into this. You already took her benefits. Don't take her memory, too. He left at 4:40. I watched the Mercedes back out of the driveway, and I sat at that table again, alone, in the house that Gloria and I built together. But this time, I wasn't confused. I wasn't broken. I was clear. The next 3 months unfolded with the cold precision of a legal system doing its work. March 2024. The SEC formally charged Darnell Morris Caldwell with securities fraud, wire fraud, and identity theft. His assets were frozen. The Mercedes was repossessed. The apartment at The View, gone. The Coinbase account, seized. The LinkedIn profile that once said 8-figure crypto entrepreneur went dark. His 11 investors filed civil suits. Gerald Tate's attorney was particularly aggressive. Brenda Holloway joined a group complaint with 4 other investors. Patricia told me the total civil liability could exceed $500,000. Darnell hired a defense attorney, a public defender at first, then a private attorney named Michael Chun, who worked out of a small office on Central Avenue. Not the kind of lawyer you hire when you have 8 figures, the kind you hire when you have nothing. April 2024. Darnell pled guilty to 3 counts: securities fraud, wire fraud, identity theft. The plea deal, negotiated by Chun, included full cooperation with the SEC, complete asset disclosure, and restitution payments to all identified victims. His sentence: 18 months in federal prison. Butner Federal Correctional Complex, 2 hours east of Charlotte, right there in North Carolina, plus 3 years of supervised release. $411,000 in court-ordered restitution. When Patricia called to tell me the sentencing details, I was standing in my kitchen, pouring coffee. The same coffee I'd brewed too strong the morning those agents first appeared. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought about it for a long time. I feel like a man who just watched his house survive a storm. The roof's damaged. Some windows are broken, but the foundation held. That's because you built the foundation right, Harold. Darnell reported to Butner on May 6, 2024. I didn't go. Lorraine offered to drive me. I said no, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. My presence there would have been for him. And this was no longer about making things easier for Darnell. But I did write him a letter, mailed it the day before he reported. I won't share all of it. Some things between a father and son stay between a father and son, but I'll share the end. Darnell, I love you. That has never changed, and it never will. But love without truth is just sentiment, and sentiment never saved anybody. You are going to a place where everything is taken from you. Your name, your image, your freedom, your dignity. And for the first time in your adult life, you will have nothing to perform with. No suit, no car, no LinkedIn profile, no audience, just you. I pray that when you find yourself alone with yourself, you discover someone worth knowing. Your mother used to say that a man's character isn't built in the good times. It's revealed in the bad ones. You're about to enter the worst time of your life. And I believe, because I have to believe, that somewhere inside you is the man we raised. Find him, Dad. The months after Darnell's sentencing were quiet. The kind of quiet that follows a storm when you're still checking for damage. I worked with Patricia to recover what could be recovered. The SSA restored my benefits within 6 weeks of filing the fraud report. Back payments of $96,800 were processed by August. The fraudulent credit accounts were disputed and removed from my record by September, though the process required 47 separate phone calls, 14 written disputes, and 3 visits to the Truist branch on South Tryon, where a manager named Derek personally shepherded my case through the system. Gerald Tate got back $18,000 through the restitution order. Not his full $50,000, but something. He called me to say thank you, which felt strange, a victim thanking another victim. But I understood. We were connected now. bonded by the same betrayal. Brenda Holloway's daughter started at Spelman that fall anyway. The church in Gastonia, Mount Zion, AIM, held a fundraiser. The community covered what Darnell stole. That's what community does. It fills the holes that broken people leave behind. I met my grandson in July. Vanessa reached out through Patricia. She was scared. I could hear it in her voice on the phone. She didn't know how much I knew. She didn't know if I blamed her. I drove to Raleigh on a Saturday morning. She lived in a modest townhouse, not the North Hills place anymore. That was gone with the frozen assets. She'd moved to a 2-bedroom off Capitol Boulevard. Clean, small, real. The boy's name was Harold. Harold Darnell Caldwell, too. Darnell named his son after me and never told me he existed. I held that boy in the doorway of his mother's apartment. 3 years old. Big brown eyes, glorious cheekbones, my forehead. He looked at me with that open curiosity children have before the world teaches them to guard themselves. "Hi," he said. "Hi, young man," I said. And something in my chest that had been locked since October opened. I visit every other weekend now. The drive from Charlotte to Raleigh takes about 2 hours and 40 minutes. I take I-85 to I-40, same route I used to drive when I visited the Duke Energy Raleigh office. I bring books, building blocks, a small tool set made for kids, the Fisher-Price one from Target, because it's never too early to learn how things are built. Vanessa and I don't talk much about Darnell. When we do, she's honest. She says she didn't know about the fraud. She says she believed the LinkedIn profile, the suits, the confidence. She says she loved a version of him that didn't exist. I believe her, because I love that version too. Now let me tell you about the part nobody expects. Darnell wrote me from Butner. Not right away. The first letter came in September, 4 months into his sentence. It was short, careful, like a man testing ice he wasn't sure would hold. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He didn't make excuses. He wrote about the daily routine. Wake up at 6, breakfast at 6:30, work detail in the facility library from 8 to 2. He was organizing books, categorizing, building a system. Building a system. I read that line 3 times. The second letter came in November. Longer. He'd started a financial literacy class offered through a nonprofit that works with federal inmates. He was learning for the first time about actual investing, index funds, compound interest, the difference between an asset and a liability. Things I tried to teach him when he was 22. Things he'd dismissed as employee thinking. "Dad," he wrote, "I sat in a class today where a man explained the rule of 72. And I thought about all the times you tried to teach me about patience and compound growth and wouldn't listen. I thought I was smarter than the system. Smarter than you. I wasn't smarter than anything. I was just louder." The third letter. January 2025. This is the one that sits in my desk drawer now, next to Gloria's last birthday card. I met a man in here named Curtis, 67 years old. Retired postman. In for tax fraud. Curtis told me something last week that I haven't been able to shake. He said, "Young man, the worst thing about prison isn't the walls. It's the mirror. Because in here, there's nothing between you and the truth about yourself. Dad, I've been looking in that mirror. And I don't like what I see. But for the first time in my life, I'm not looking away. You told me once that the man who builds slow builds strong. I didn't listen. I built fast. I built fake. And the wind came. When I get out, I'm not going to be the man I was. I can't promise I'll be the man you wanted me to be. But I'll be honest. That's where I'm starting. Honest. I love you, Pops. For real this time. Not the performance. The real thing. I read that letter sitting in Gloria's chair. The green wingback by the window. And I cried. Not the tears of a man whose son stole from him. The tears of a man who might be getting his son back. Darnell is scheduled for release in November 2025. He'll come out with nothing. No savings. No reputation. No LinkedIn profile claiming 8 figures. No Mercedes. No luxury apartment. He'll have a federal conviction on his record. He'll have $411,000 in restitution debt. He'll have a name that anyone with a Google search can connect to fraud. His image is damaged. His dignity is stained. The community that once saw him posting photos from Dubai will now see a man who stole from his own father and went to federal prison. That stain doesn't wash out quickly. Maybe it never washes out completely, but it can fade if the man underneath it does the work. And here's what I believe, because I've watched structures fail and structures hold for over 4 decades. Darnell is going to have to rebuild from the foundation. Not the penthouse, the foundation. Brick by brick. The way I did. The way my father did. The way every man in our family has done since my grandfather laid railroad ties in Mecklenburg County in 1948. He's going to learn the lesson I tried to hand him for free. The lesson he wouldn't take. The lesson that patience isn't weakness. That steady work isn't for suckers. That a name built honestly over 40 years is worth more than a LinkedIn profile built on lies in 4 months. He's going to learn it the hardest way possible. By living the consequences. By waking up every morning with that restitution number hanging over him. By walking into job interviews where the background check tells the story before he can. By earning trust $1 one day, one honest act at a time. And I'll be there, not to carry him. I'm done carrying, but to watch, to witness. And when he does something real, something earned, something true, I'll be the first to say, I see you, son, because that's what my father would have done. I'm 65 now. I turned 66 in April. My knees are worse. My coffee is still too strong. Gloria's garden still blooms every spring, and I still talk to her when I'm pulling weeds. I tell her about our grandson, about the blocks he stacks and the way he laughs when they fall, about how he calls me Pop Pop and reaches for my hand when we walk to the park. I tell her about Darnell, too. I tell her the truth, all of it. And I like to think she hears me. That somewhere, she's shaking her head the way she always did when our son made another mess. But smiling, too, because maybe, this time, the mess will teach him what we couldn't. The man who builds slow, builds strong. The man who builds fast, builds for the wind. And the man who builds on lies, builds for the storm that's already coming. I'm standing in my driveway right now. Same driveway where those agents pulled up 17 months ago. The azaleas Gloria planted along the walkway are starting to bloom, pink and white. She always said azaleas were proof that beautiful things take time. If you've been through something like this, a child who broke your trust, a family member who stole more than money, tell me about it. I read every comment. And if you're new here, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I've got more to share. I think you and I understand each other.